Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the fourth round of the 2024-2025 UCI Cyclocross World Cup, which took place in Hulst. With me here to do that is Issam. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Hulst, an iconic course on the circuit. It's really, maybe a bit too early to already call it a modern classic, but it's certainly heading that way. It's a famous course right in the old city center of Hulst, up and around the old bankings which used to protect the city back in the dark ages. Today was the first race in a double weekend. I attended the racing in Hulst. After that, Issam, I drove to Beringen, where I am now, about 20 minutes from Zonhoven. The circus is really moving there on the highway. After the race, we passed several camper vans, including the one of Puk Pieterse. Here, where we're staying now, we could see some camper vans of Paul Sauze and of Bal-Trek Lions in other hotels. The camper van of Zoe Bakset is parked in front of our hotel. It's really moved here, and it was a busy day, especially for the juniors, because they raced early in the morning, and a couple of them drove to Zonhoven after that to do the training for tomorrow's race. So it's been really busy, and somebody who certainly will have made that short transfer, because really it's just an hour and a half between Hulst and Zonhoven, is Niels Vandeputte, because he took his first ever Men Elite World Cup win. He did so in quite dominant fashion. He had the fastest start, took off, and was never seen again, really. He opened a 30-second gap. In the middle part of the race, Felipe Orts managed to come quite close, but Orts couldn't come close enough. So Vandeputte took the win ahead of Orts for third place. That looked to be in the hands of Eli Iserbyt for a while, but he got caught and passed by Pim Ronhaar, who took the final place on the podium. First World Cup win for Vandeputte. He starts the busiest time of the year with a great feeling. It can't be any other after such a ride. So it must give him a great confidence boost. 10 races coming up for him in, I think, 15 days or something. So he'll be very busy. He, of course, hopes to add more flowers to his collection in the upcoming days. But, yeah, that ride, Issam. He was, as said, the fastest out of the start. And in our preview, we said the start is important. But I didn't really think it would be this important, because we'll come to the women's race in a bit. But quite similar, right? A rider who you know is being good this season kind of takes off at the start and then just seizes the day.
Yeah, I definitely think that is what happened. And I think that what helped Vandeputte as well, apart from his fast start, was that he, his technical abilities really helped him to maintain that position, because we saw the legs of Van der Haar also at the front at the beginning of the race. But, the legs, if they are not there, then it's going to be quite difficult to hold on to the positions. And then when the mistakes creep in, then obviously it becomes more and more difficult to hold on. And you just lose so much ground compared to the rest who do not make mistakes or less. I think with Vandeputte it was, he set a very good pace. He paced himself quite well, and he was also, for the first half of the race, I didn't spot that many mistakes. I don't think he made that many, actually. It was almost a flawless first part of the race. Then it started to become a little bit more tricky for him. I think that he also kind of felt the pressure coming from behind, with Orts really putting on the pressure. At a certain point, it almost looked like he could be able to bridge the gap to Vandeputte, but then I think Vandeputte kind of answered and countered, the chase of Orts, and was able to then maintain in the last two laps the gap and even make it a little bit bigger. And I think that is eventually what won the race, next to having a very good start, is just having very good legs, not making that many mistakes. And Vandeputte is technically a very gifted rider. He was able to showcase that, and it's great to see. I think for him right now, as you say, starting this busy period, and he's intending to do quite some races in the next couple of weeks. So, the flow he is going to be in right now is quite insane. And for a rider that is not always the most consistent this season so far, I think this is, we could arguably already say that his 2 weeks is almost a success, to be honest.
Well, I do think that Vandeputte has been very consistent this season. You could argue that in Antwerp he wasn't really that good. That was like the sign that a dip was coming. But then he went to Spain to train for 2.5 weeks. And last week in Herentals he was fine, but then he was sick and didn't race in Namur. It's clear that he, but also Cameron Mason, who was also sick last weekend, clearly bounced back from that quite well. Of course, then the questions that are being asked in the Belgian media are, well, was it really an illness or was it a convenient illness? It doesn't really matter to me, because the matter of the fact is both riders performed today. Vandeputte really seized the day. What you said about his technical ability was super, super clear on this section in the middle of the course. You kind of came down this super big bridge through the mud, and then you shot up this climb, and his ability to consistently perform and execute on that climb was the perfect example of that technical advantage you mentioned, because he was able to ride that, whereas Orts played it on safe. Like, he rode up half of it and then jumped up almost every lap. And in the background, maybe off of the TV cameras, I saw more riders like, nice, he tried to ride it many times. The crowd was hyping him up. But for every time he made it, there was also another time he didn't make it, which meant that he lost more time trying to ride that than that he gained by the few times he was able to ride that. And the rain played a super big factor in the race, because it was consistently raining, not hard, but certainly enough to make the course super, super slippery. Ronhaar said he started on the baby Limas and was too late to switch to the full Limas tire. The woman had certainly torn up the course even more than it already was, and it became a super honest course. It became, to me, almost the essence of cyclocross. It was a natural course, apart from the barriers, all the features. No, that's not true. There was also a set of stairs, but it was mostly natural features. There was natural elevation. There was this super steep run-up. There were corners, but none of this TV Mickey Mouse 180-degree corners. I think there were only one or two of them, but it was quite technical. You needed to have the power. You needed to be a complete cyclocross rider today. And Vandeputte is a complete cyclocross rider today. We've talked about it before. He's become a very versatile rider, and that's always a sign of development. If you can work on your weaknesses and make sure to perform on every course, that's how you become one of the best cyclocross riders. Vandeputte certainly showcased that he did that today, but Orts, he just keeps delivering. It kind of had the feeling for a bit that his moment in the season was over. In Dublin, he was lucky with that third place, but kind of after Hamme, I felt like it was going a bit downwards. 9th in Antwerp, lucky in Dublin, not there in Namur, but he surprised me today. It was a really good outing by him today, and for him also, phenomenal technical abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with Vandeputte, the last couple of races were the ones that I remember the best at the moment, and those were, as you said, there was that dip, and it was going to be a difficult task, or somewhat difficult, to bounce back from that, but he obviously did, and before that, it was quite consistent indeed. I mean, with Orts, it was as much as a surprise as when he emerged there as the first chaser, when I think that was actually the lap where both Van Toerenhout and Iserbyt crashed on that downhill, and there was Orts. And I think Nijs also had his moment there, and then after that we didn't really see him emerge in the top 10, and kind of faded, and quite badly in a way. But Orts didn't, and Orts was able to somewhat bounce back from what you say was somewhat a dip, and that was kind of, I think for him, he had to somewhat bounce back and make sure that he can still put a stamp on this season, because as you say, he definitely, so far his season has been phenomenal, but it would be a bit of a shame if he wasn't really able to then, in the later phases of the season towards the Worlds, he was not really able to have more of those moments. But he delivered, and he delivered in a way on a course that gave him also the opportunity to shine, to use his technical abilities, because Vandeputte was definitely a pleasure to watch, but I think Orts, especially with that fighting spirit, never giving up and giving it his all and more than that. At least that's the body language that he gives you. It was truly incredible to see that he was able to bounce back and also be able to fight for a podium the way he did, because it was, from his side, of, I would say, a phenomenal ride and something to be proud of.
So Orts, because he is from Spain and because you associate Spain with good weather, which certainly isn't always true. I mean, just look at that race in Igorre a few weeks ago. But because he's from the Valencia region, and that is rightfully associated with good weather, people think Orts does best on fast courses. And based on maybe some early career results, that's fine. But he really is a rider that does best in the mud and on technical courses. There is a reason that he performs so well in Niel almost every single year, because that's mud and technical. And he got that course here as well. So it was indeed great to see him up there. Shame he couldn't convert that to a victory. I agree with what you said earlier that Vandeputte probably felt him coming and then just repacked himself, so I'll leave it with that. But what you shouldn't underestimate is that this course became super, super honest and super brutal. That section, like after that big downhill, where you go around the water with the drone shots from the side, power only. You have that big run up, that's super draining. It's maybe not a course like Namur because there's less elevation, but it maybe looks a bit easier than it actually is. There's a lot of dragging there. The ground is super saturated because you're so close to the water. It's not deep mud, but it's certainly sucking you in. And I feel like that's also partly why Ronhaar could really perform today. He said he switched tires too late, which I can see why he thinks that, and I would agree with that assessment. Again, also for Ronhaar, last week he said, I don't know how consistent I will be, but this is his third good race in a row, and he should also be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what if he was on the right tire from the get-go? I think that could have played a role in at the end of the race, but I think that he should be happy that he kind of got he kind of showcased now that it is not a lucky thing or just, a one-off. He is able now on a somewhat consistent basis to be up there, and the performance is there when he needs it. And now he has to just make sure that the races that are coming up for him are done in a similar fashion, and then the races will come to you in a way, because I think with that many races that we just have coming up, there is obviously going to be just one or two races where you might get a chance to get a good result in, and who knows what race that will be for him. But I feel that he is definitely on the way up, and if it's not on the way up, it's at least a positive that he can take from the season so far, because the way he started his season was obviously not great, delayed. It's looking very positive for Ronhaar, and I think that this third place is also something that he can look at and be like, we are here, and the form is very respectable. And I think that if you look a little bit further down the top 10, you will find some that are very happy with the results, and also some that will look back at a somewhat miserable day and want to forget it as soon as possible.
Yeah, so let's look at that entire top 10. So behind the top 3 of Vandeputte, Orts and Ronhaar, we find Iserbyt. Iserbyt has been the talk of the town this week. It's not even an over-exaggeration. He's been the talk of Belgium. He last week DNF'd in Namur with that nerve pain, and then he kind of got like a lot of attention in the media due to that, even though it was just a general comment. Then he gave a statement in the middle of the week saying that he's been struggling with it for a long time and that it injured or it hurts him in his regular life. Then he featured on the 7 p.m. news yesterday, Friday, big primetime slot he got in that news report of the public broadcaster, kind of giving some more perspective into it. So the question was, well, how would he do? He did quite fine this race here. Nothing really all too special. He finished 4th, which is kind of in line with his season. It's up there, but those wins, they don't really come that easy. He had that weekend, of course, Kortrijk and Antwerp, but then after that it's kind of back to where it was for him before. But behind him we find Cameron Mason, Emiel Verstringen, Michael van Toerenhout, Toon Aerts, Lars van der Haar and David Menu. And then of course the rider we have to talk about here is Cameron Mason, right, Issam, because we've talked about him quite a bit before, so things didn't look too good for him. He was struggling. At some point we talked about this downward spiral, like how hard must it be for him after those European Championships last year. He won the silver medal. He was the coming man, it's overdue. He's going to win a World Cup at some point. 1 year, no good results. We had that small highlight in Hamme, then it went back downhill. Last week he got sick in Herentals, but now he hits back. This was a really, really good performance. I would almost say vintage Cameron Mason.
Yeah, he definitely came through during the race, and I think that top 5 for him is going to mean so much, because, as you say, it was this season was definitely not the greatest of seasons, and he showed promise in the past. Sometimes, a career is not always going to be an easy ride, and results that they're just going to be banked in a way. I mean, it's going to be a bumpy ride, and his ride was quite bumpy this season, but today it somewhat came together, and he was able to pick up the places, pick up the pieces of other riders making mistakes, and he got through. And the way he went through the field in the end was a job well done. He got to 5th, and then from there on hold that position, and I think that was a great job indeed. And for him now, it's going to be somewhat a task of trying to have more of these moments and somewhat forget how the season started and the downs, and just try to uplift yourself and get better results. And I think that if he can hold this and continue forward, I think that would be great, because there are some races coming up. If the weather is not going to be all too great and there is some rainfall, I think that he then obviously is going to have his chances. So that will be interesting, how consistent Mason will be after this, and if this was just a one-off that we're going to have in this period, or he is going to have more opportunities where he can show himself and take those opportunities. That's going to be somewhat the question for me, but I think for now, 5th place was for him, a great result.
So one of my favorite things when I'm actually at the cyclocross course is that you can see the progression that riders make much better than on the TV, because they don't show it for obvious reasons. But you can look at the live timing, but it's not the same. So here you see Mason in the first lap, he's 26. You're like, okay, that's all right. Like, of course, for most others, we would be like, unacceptable standard. But for Mason, you come to expect it. But in a 70-ish rider field, he's in the top 25. You're like, okay, that's a decent start. And then you could actively see him move forward through the field, pushing hard. These are his conditions. This is where he shines. This is where he excels. And that was just great to see. And as you say, it's one good result. I know that in Hamme, after that good result, we were like, okay, maybe this is a turning point for him, and it didn't really come. But I'm quite optimistic that this time we will see a change, because it looked quite good today. And just like the vintage Cameron Mason, if we're sticking to those wordings, then at the end of the race, his lap times were the same as the front runners. He finished a minute down, and guess where he lost 50 seconds in the first lap? He lost 50 seconds to Niels Vandeputte. And then in the second lap, he lost 16, and then he started lapping the same or quicker than Vandeputte. So it's the Cameron Mason we know. Obviously, he knows it as well that he needs to work on his start, and that's fine. He also didn't have a great call-up. He was on the 3rd row, maybe even 4th row, because the first 2 rows are done by World Cup rankings. So it was good, but let's see how he will do in the more muddy courses we get in this Christmas period. Gavere should be a good course for him. Muddy Dendermonde, Besançon, I don't know what his program exactly is, but fingers crossed that things go on the up now for Mason. In the rest of the top 10, maybe a couple of short comments. So Verstringen, decent outing, a solid outing. He kind of confirms that Namur was not a complete freak event. Van Toerenhout, too many crashes, crashed twice in the big downhill. He still remains the leader in the World Cup. He looked quite surprised when they announced that he should report himself at the podium. He has a 28-point lead on Toon Aerts. He actually expanded that gap a bit because Aerts finished 8th. Not a good day by Aerts. In the first lap, he crashed right in front of me in a very easy corner. He could start chasing from 40th, so that definitely impacted his race. And then 2 things here, Issam, and let's first talk about David Menu. He finished 10th here. That's probably a more surprising result than Mason. Menu is a rider who we saw in the top 10 at the European Championships this year. He is a fast course specialist, but now he delivers in the completely opposite conditions. I was really surprised by that, But then I started thinking a bit more, and while it remains a surprising result, I had the feeling there's many riders missing, and that's also true, because there was a standalone U23 race. Del Grosso, 5th last week. Michels, 8th last week. Haverdings has also been up there this year. That's 3 riders that could have finished in the top 10. So if you account for a couple of riders missing, then also factor in the fact that a couple of riders had complete off days. Viseur, 23rd. Zweek, 15th. Talk about Van der Haar and Nijs in a bit. Then it kind of makes a bit more sense if you place it in context. But nevertheless, David Menu, but also Mees Hendricks, who was running in 7th at some point, they seized the opportunity, and that's certainly worth something. So I shouldn't be too critical, because you can only race those who are there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I wouldn't even have mentioned it, to be honest. I would have just been, for Menu finishing in the top 10, I think that is, for me at least, a surprise, despite the field that we have, because a guy like Nijs should have been in the top 10, to be honest. But more on that a little later. For him, that he just rode a very good race. Had some fast lap times in the mid part of the race, and then from there on, just got himself in the position to finish in the top 10. And with Hendricks, it was similar. I mean, we saw him actually within the top 10. Wasn't able to hold on to that, and that was a bit of a shame. But I think that for him, we can look back on a strong race. I think the circumstances in a way made it for some riders a chaotic race. Some riders maybe after a couple of crashes and mistakes got a little demotivated, and I'm not going to already say that some riders were with their heads at tomorrow at Zonhoven, but I feel that there might be a few that had sort of the idea of, okay, I'm fighting here for whatever. I'm not really going to put too much at stake, and tomorrow is going to be a new day. The weather wasn't great, the circumstances, it's just those things. But for those guys to be able to seize the momentum and get a good result in, you're not always going to get that opportunity. So I think for them to seize it, it's great to see, and I love it. I'm all for it.
I guess what I tried to state was that when there are standalone U23 races and when a couple of other riders have a bad day, it provides opportunities to perform and punch above your weight. And that doesn't make it any less impressive that Menu finishes 10th. It's a really good result. He's 32 years old. And I remember a few seasons ago, I think 2022, we were talking about him. I had a good start to the season. He had that top 10 in the Waterloo World Cup. And we were like, this is really impressive. A 30-year-old guy, his head down, kept pushing, kept pursuing his career. Never been the biggest name. And I would echo many of those thoughts here. He did really, really well. He moved through the field as well. And ultimately, not making mistakes, having a good day, those are all parts of the sport. So certainly didn't want to diminish that performance. Although, as you say, a rider like Nijs should have finished in the top 10. And that should be our final point here on the men's race. The time with Nijs is kind of running out, right? Like we said last week, but 2 punctures. And in Dublin, well, it was that crash. And in Antwerp, it was a bad day. And in Hamme, it was also a crash. But ultimately, we have a streak of 5 bad races in a row. And there's the saying, you're as good as your last race. That's obviously a bit of an over-exaggeration. But time is running out, right? Like, you can't keep making these reasons why it doesn't bolt, why it doesn't go. Obviously, he thinks things will click and things will go better. They can, but they also kind of need to start doing that at some point, like maybe tomorrow in Zonhoven or maybe in Gavere, but there is no infinite amount of time. So at some point things will need to come together and Nijs will need to show us why he is that European champion. Then let's move to the women's race. As said, quite a similar race scenario to the men's race. No surprises that Maurice Schreiber has the fastest start. Sun comes up, Maurice Schreiber takes the fastest start, Maurice Schreiber fades a bit, and the sun goes down. Wait, no, not today. We said it a couple of times, especially last year, like at some point there is a day that this sticks for Schreiber, and today was the day. She had the fastest start, opened a 10-second gap because Backstedt was in second. The bigger names were a bit further behind, and while they were moving through the field, Schreiber was hammering it. She got a 20-second gap, then a 30-second gap. And then the race was already halfway by the time that Lucinda Brandt hit the second place. Brandt started pushing, managed to eat a bit from that lead, but never came close enough. Schreiber took her first ever World Cup win, with Brandt finishing second and Pieterse finishing third. It was quite the feel-good story, Issam. Like we've said with a couple of riders before, for Vandeputte, a big win at some point was overdue in the World Cup. Schreiber and Buckstead, those are also riders in that category. The win in the World Cup was going to come at some point, and today everything clicked for Schreiber. It just worked out. The start was important. Again, I didn't think it would be that important, but she was gone, long gone, before Brandt even properly started her race.
The start was great, but it was actually the effort that she did after that start as well that was somewhat insane, because Buckstead was somewhat in touch with Schreiber, but at a certain point was just not really able to follow. And I think, as you say, this season so far for Schreiber, apart from the somewhat deception of the European Championships, I think has been a season where she really developed in such a way that she is able to also have a follow-up after a fast start. And today she was able to make use of that, and the start was great, but then what she did during the race as well was also important. As I say, I mean, Brandt had to chase, and the gap was there, but then you still have to maintain it and not crack under pressure. And I think for Schreiber, she was in a position that is somewhat unusual for her. I mean, obviously she's being chased, but it's not that she's getting caught after the second or third lap. Now it was, she had to maintain the gap, and she did well. And I think that was, it was great to see first World Cup race win for her. And I think that is, that's just great to see, because we are finally not a Dutch woman winning a race. Although the flag is somewhat similar, I think that it was still a history moment that we witnessed today, and it was great. These are just moments that you learn from and you just get better from, and I think that the experience that you take with you today, winning a World Cup, is just, I think that must be one of the better feelings you get in an overall career. I think there are only a few things that can get better than that. One of which is going to be the rainbow stripe. So. I think for her it was probably a great day.
The Dutch flag from Wish taking the win with Schreiber, but to me it seemed like it was not that crazy to see her open that gap, because the second place was Buckstead, and where Schreiber opened the gap was around the technical section before the downhill. I think Buckstead rode a solid race. She was 7th in the end. Her power was quite good, and the technical ability, like we know, is not the best with Buckstead, but it looked quite okay. It wasn't the worst, and I would say she finished kind of where I would expect her to finish on a course like this. And for Schreiber, on the other hand, it's quite a good course. Like the running, the steep uphill, that's something that Schreiber can take quite well. There were a couple of power sections, but also Schreiber has developed into a quite versatile rider. Many similarities with Niels van de Putte there. Of course, Schreiber is still a few years younger, I think 3 years younger from the top of my head. So it was a good outing by her. At the same time, I do think that Brandt gave away another opportunity at victory here with a bad start. She said that she unclipped from her pedal, but it's been a reoccurring thing, right? Like her starts aren't that good, and today she needed to chase, and in a way she was also lucky that Pieterse is still rusty. Pieterse made many mistakes. I think she too could have been in contention for the win had she been more smooth, but certainly with a few less mistakes, 1 or 2, she could have beaten Brandt.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think Pieterse, she was making, over the course of a lap, was making mistakes, but there was just that one bridge for, I think, 2-3 laps. She just, I don't know, stood still because she didn't carry any speed there, because she made a mistake, at the bottom of that bridge, and then when she went on the bridge, just lost so much speed that, it looked a bit bad, and she lost quite some ground there, and on other places on the course as well. Just it wasn't the greatest of races for Pieterse, although the form was somewhat there and she was able to stay at the front. But mistakes, just somewhat silly mistakes as well. And for Brandt, yeah, I agree with you there. I think that start for her is just was again today an issue. When Schreiber is going to be the one you have to beat, then obviously the start is something that you need to be good at. And I think that is what Brandt failed to do. And you saw that she was somewhat able in the race to close down the gap a little bit, but the gap was there, and then it's obviously a little bit more difficult to close it, because when it gets at a certain point, it's just you chase, you win a little bit, but then you make a mistake or something doesn't go really right, and then you have to chase again. It's just a bit different if the gap is so big compared to when it's maybe 10 seconds, because then you can see the leader, you can see what you're chasing. And I think for Brandt it was just now a little bit more difficult. So yeah, I think for both Brandt and Petersen it wasn't the greatest of races, but they're still on the podium. So I guess in a way, if all by all it was not the worst races they have ridden in their careers.
No, certainly not. And again, I don't say this to discredit the win of Schreiber, because you need to seize the opportunity. If the others don't deliver, which they did, then you need to take advantage of that. That's more the point I'm trying to make. I kind of have the feeling I come across as a bit pessimistic because maybe I'm a bit tired, but really that's not the point I want to make. Brandt and Petersen, they didn't have any bad luck. They just didn't perform as well as Schreiber did. And this is a course where the start was important. She seized the opportunity there. She took the day. She took the bull by the horns. And from there on, because on this course it's quite good to be alone, she managed to go away. It's not hard to ride alone here. There's no group effect. There's, first of all, few straights. Only that section after the big downhill to the super long steep run-up, only that section is a real long straightaway. But because of the mud, it was an honest race. It didn't really matter if you were in a group there. In fact, it might have been even better if you were alone, because we saw Petersen hold up Brandt there at some point. I think at some point also Backstedt held up a couple of people there. So it was a solid, a consistent outing by Schreiber. I couldn't really see anything that I thought, whoa, if you can still improve that, it will be much better. It was just solid. It was an 8, a 9. Nothing really special, nothing crazy. No crazy risk taking, also running the steep downhill at some point to avoid risks, and that's also maturity. And for her, super happy that she took the win. I said, I think I gave my opinion about Brandt and Petersen already. Too many mistakes. Petersen will definitely improve. I think her base level is there. If we look at the rest of the top 10, we find Vorst in 4th. She's kind of just existing. She's always up there, but never really in contention. 1 or 2% more and she can compete there. Van der Heijden finishes 5th. She was in 3rd at some point, but fell back a bit in the second half of the race. Then Bentveld was 6th, ahead of Backstedt, Alvarado, Vash and Bakker. No Van Empel in the top 10. She didn't start. She crashed on the same knee this week during training as she crashed on in Namur and is sitting out this weekend. But the ride here in the top 10 of the weekend, or of the day, comes from Leni Bentveld. This is her first real good race of the season, Issam. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I somewhat agree with you. I think that this season has been struggling a little bit. And I think that maybe expectations were somewhat based on last season. And we might have expected a similar growth, or at least, being able to continue on a similar basis. But it didn't really come out that way. And yeah, today it just clicked. She was up there from the start, and from there on was able to maintain herself quite well and never really faded in a way that she lost out on the position she had at the start. So I think for her it was a very good race and somewhat more in line with her potential and what we somewhat can expect from her. So I think for Bentveld was a great outing, and that is somewhat what we would like to see. But we also need to not forget that she's quite young, and when you're a little younger, it's sometimes the consistency where you can struggle with. The positive thing is obviously then you still need to have some of those results that confirm that the form is there and that you're doing the right things. You just need to have to get confirmation. I think that was today's the case. The race was there, didn't make that crazy mistakes, and then was able to hold on to a very, great 6th place. So I think for her, great outing.
Yeah, and the course also played to her strength, right? So it was tough, it was demanding, and that's where Bentveld does best. She doesn't like this summer cross, the grass crits, that's nothing for her. So she would have certainly been happy with this course. Normally the conditions should have also been good for Alvarado, but she didn't really have her day. Kind of resembling the race in Antwerp, just from the start, not really in it. At some point she was grabbing to her thigh or her hip. Maybe she hit something, maybe it was her stomach and she had some sort of cramps, but it certainly wasn't the day of Alvarado. We'll see tomorrow. There was no comment after the race, so there's no point in guessing what was up, but that was unfortunate. Outside of the top 10, we saw some of the younger U23s fight for position. Eva Holmgren, very solid outing in 15th. She definitely was quite scared in the big downhill, lost some time there every lap. And then a bit further down, we saw a big battle between Celia Gery, Vida Lopez de San Roman and Isabella Holmgren. Gery looked out of it, she was fading. She was with Holmgren for quite a while, then fell back. But then in the final lap, repacked herself, overtook Lopez de San Roman and Holmgren again to finish 19th. Isabella Holmgren, her form is really good. Really good. What I saw from that was impressive. I honestly think on a less technical, so pretty much read here, muddy worlds course, she can compete for, probably for a podium. I do think on that course she can fight with Bentveld, Backstedt, and even Schreiber. I think we'll see more things there. Somebody who unfortunately wasn't in that battle was Kat Ferguson. There was no footage on the TV of her crash. I also didn't see her crash, but she crashed in the second lap. First Foucounet went down. I would like to talk briefly about that downhill. So the safety of that downhill is too poor. In my opinion, in this condition, it can't be in the race. My problem is not necessarily with the downhill. We have more challenging features. But I think my problems can be divided into 3 categories. So first of all, there's no safety zone to the water, which only adds extra fear for the riders because nobody wants to go in. They don't want to ruin their bike. They don't want to be posted to social media diving into the water because it's quite embarrassing. It only adds extra fear, which means they will just brake more. And the more you brake there when it's wet, the more dangerous it gets. It's really, really difficult. It's really steep. Secondly, at the bottom, there is this double taped zone for a cameraman, which is taped with wooden bollards. And that basically just means there's more wood to crash in. They're not protected. Like in Gavre, where you have the big downhill, they have this big inflatable air cushion, which helps. But my biggest problem with it is what happens when you crash there. The way you need to get out is you need to be put on a stretcher and they need to carry you up the climb, which is as steep as the run-up they take later. So Foucounet was taken on the stretcher, and then Ferguson... The crash happened in lap 2, remember? She was there until lap 5. Somewhere around the end of lap 5, when Schreiber went into the final lap, they finally took her away. And in the meantime, there were just people standing there telling the riders to avoid the lines that Ferguson was blocking, that were the ones most left on the screen. That made it even more dangerous, because the riders weren't really prepared for that. At the top, there was this steward standing, and he was even tapping riders on their shoulder, which could have gone horribly wrong because they were moving at it with speed. So those were all risky things that didn't help. But to me, that is the biggest problem because Ferguson, she went to the hospital. Luckily, no major injuries, but she'll be off the bike for a while. What if somebody does break their collarbone there in a super bad way? What if they break their neck? What if they break their spine? That's a horrible position. What if they need urgent medical care? Then you can't be laying there for 4 laps waiting to be carried up. There needs to be like a boat or something so he can be taken away there. That's my biggest problem. It's not necessarily the downhill, it's the safety of the downhill at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that there needs to be some sort of a protocol initiated in which and that has to be done before the race and not particularly by the organizers, but maybe there needs to be a responsibility for the UCI that just checks certain zones that could be dangerous and where medical assistance could be something that needs to be attending there at that point. It just needs to be somewhat quicker and it needs to be safer. And I think that I looked at that, both the men's and the women's race, and there were some very sketchy descents there where you were happy that they were down because it could have gone the opposite way. And I was a bit in, I was somewhat between two thoughts in a way. On one side, I was like, is this something that needs to be in cyclocross, in the sense that does it need to have this element of danger? An object like that, a downhill like that, be able to be done in all conditions safely? Or does this need to be a part of cyclocross? And I, as much as I like it, in the sense that, danger that there is and the risk that you can see on TV, I don't know if necessary in the sense, and if it is, something that could be done safely and at all times. Obviously, it's a sport with risks, so I'm not going to deny that, and I don't want it to be a sport where we don't have any of these obstacles and downhills. But I had it with Namur. I have it again. I'm a bit on the. I don't know. For me, it's a bit. I look at those things and I'm like, does cyclocross need it? And I don't know. I don't know how you think about that.
I think these steep downhills are exciting and they can be a part of cyclocross. You just need to make them safer, right? Like, you can either completely scrap this downhill, and I think you can add a super exciting Swiss downhill with a couple of corners, significantly reducing the speed, so a couple of 180s downwards. That could be an option, or you just keep it like it is because they are quite spectacular. I think they are fine in cyclocross, but again, just work on the safety. Just make sure that if somebody needs urgent medical care down there, that it happens. Next year the World Championships are here, so you better be prepared for whatever happens, because I don't want to be sitting here next year or any year and that somebody needs urgent care there and they don't get it, and we can be like, oh, but in 2024 the Cyclocross Social podcast said this needed to happen. I don't want to be sitting there like that. So just make it safer. Add some cushions, maybe add a corner so the drop-in speed is a bit lower. The rut was super deep this year. The rain certainly factored in, so just make it safer, because that's my main concern with it again. So again, make it safer. Let's move to the U23 race then, Issam. I can give you a brief summary there. David Haverlings had the fastest start. He tried to take advantage of the fact that Tibor Del Grosso, the world champion, was starting on the third row. Del Grosso, however, you cannot panic the man. He just chilled for the first two laps. He just moved through the field, overtake here, overtake there, small effort here, nothing too crazy. Got to the wheel of Haverlings, two Dutch leaders, but Jente Michels, he was caught behind. The European champion and World Cup leader needed to put in a big effort to finally catch the leaders. There were three leaders. They switched positions a couple of times. With 3 laps to go, Michels placed an attack. He got a 4-second gap, but then Del Grosso reacted, closed the gap, attacked over Michels, and took victory ahead of Michels and Haverlings. Before the race, I was asked to do a prediction. I predicted this podium. It was quite predictable. A boring prediction is what they said. And I said I agree, but sometimes boring is right, and that's kind of my takeaway here. It really reflects the U23 scene this year. Del Grosso is slightly better than Michels, and they are slightly better than Haverlings, especially physically, and that's no shame because Haverlings is a year younger.
Yeah, I think that, Del Grosso at the moment has the upper hand, and that is something that we might be able to expect over the course of the entirety of the season. If nothing weird happens, I think that Del Grosso is going to be the guy to beat. But yeah, it's somewhat, it cannot always be exciting. And to be honest, we got in almost every category, we got races in which once the leader was at the front, it was difficult to be overtaken, and so it was for Del Grosso as well. And there are quite some talents. I think the only thing that is quite interesting again is that Michels, yet again, is able to somewhat mess up his start and not be at the front, and puts himself again in a compromising position, which has been the story for quite some races already this season.
Yeah, certainly, and I think that's maybe something that has to do with pressure, because in other races he's kind of okay. I mean, of course, Namur was horrible, but that wasn't his mistake at all. That was just unlucky. So I don't know. I think my question is, Issam, at what point do we think that Del Grosso should race the Elite World Championships? He was fifth in Namur last year, or last week, sorry. Last year, he showed some of his talent in Hulst here by finishing 10th in the Elite race. He was constantly trying to ride that uphill after the bridge where he had that steep run-up under the stairs. At what point do you think he should consider it at this moment? Or do you think, well, fifth, add in Vandeputte, he drops down a bit? Like, what standard does he need to reach before he should start considering that?
I think win a race and be somewhat a little bit more consistent on the podium. But like when most of the riders that have a chance on the podium are there, I think at the moment the way he's racing right now, despite the fact that he has that advantage, and if he would do the elite race, it would be difficult, but he could maybe potentially eye a podium. I don't think that he should take that risk. I think also marketing wise and the team, they probably would like to have the rainbow stripes, and he's not in a position right now in which he could potentially win at the elite. And I think that is, for me at least, I would say that if you have a chance of winning, then you should just go for it, even though it's maybe a small chance. But if you have the chance, you should go for it. But I think at the moment he doesn't really have that, and I personally think that he's not going to get in such a position in the remainder of the season. And so I would say that I don't think that moment will come. But if there was a moment that where he should be thinking about, the choice is if he is able to win a race in the next coming weeks, and have like a podium next to that or so, then I would take it into consideration. But at the moment, no, really, I would just be starting at the under 23, to be honest.
I think a medal, like if he has a realistic chance at a medal, that would be a valid point to start considering it. But if he gets a couple of fifth places, which is obviously very good, it's probably still a bit too early, and he should just try and clinch another U23 world title. Michels, of course, not really a point. He hasn't won that U23 world title. It's a big goal of his and also for his team, so we'll see that. Then I think a few more takeaways I had from this race is BCO. He is by far the best talent that doesn't come from the Netherlands and Belgium. It's quite critical that this rider keeps doing cyclocross. He is really talented. I said it before, Dublin was not representative for what he would show. Today he was good. I liked what I saw. Fighting spirit consistently up there. No fallback in the second half of the race. Technically it looked solid. He's more in the rhythm now. He's getting in the zone, and I like to see that. I hope that he can improve a bit more and compete for a medal at the World Championships. Maybe a bit optimistic, but it is in his home country, right? And things can go crazy ways in championships. But he and Courses are certainly painting themselves to be the strongest of the second year U23 generation. Courses fifth is another solid outing by him. Then from the first years, we saw two come into the top 10. Good outing today by Senna Remijn. He is not technically the most gifted rider, but he certainly performed well today. And then maybe the most surprising to me was the ride of Jules Simon. He races for the AS Bike team. From the French generation of last year, which was very strong in the junior category, he's probably the most pure cyclocross rider. And he's been doing quite well this season, but most of the time he was beaten by Aubin Sparfel in the Coupe de France races, that is. But today Simon outperformed Sparfel quite a bit, finishing 8th. That was quite impressive. And then if you go a bit further and look at those first years, you see that a bunch of them kind of came together just outside of the top 10. So Sola was 12th ahead of Sparfel. Decent outing by Sparfel. He was further back at some point, managed to fight back. Vietzi, last year's world champion, was 15th. Barnabas Vash, Barney as they call him, was 16th. And Takac Sombor was 19th. So those were kind of my takeaways. Don't know if you still have any comments or anything you would like to know, Issam.
Yeah, no, really. I think that it's just a somewhat continuation in terms of what we have seen with nationalities. The Dutch quite, having quite a few in the top 10, and the same goes for Belgium and BCO. Now together with Simon able to squeeze in the top 10, I think that is it's something that we have seen, a trend that we have seen for also in Dublin, and we see it again today. So yeah, apart from that, I don't really have something remark. So I think we can move on.
Yeah, so then let's do that and go to the junior women's race. So a trend that we saw across all youth races is that different riders came to the front than in Dublin. In the men U23, that wasn't necessarily the case for the top riders, but it certainly was the case for a group of riders that were behind there. But if you look at the women's junior race, the fastest start was again for Lisson Desprez. She was the runner-up in Dublin. She finished second there after having the fastest start. This time she didn't really get away that far. She had like a 7-second gap, but Carrier bridged that gap in the first lap, immediately attacked, and was never seen again. Desprez was in second for quite a while. She was at some point joined by her woman, Jean Duterne. Georgia Pelizzotti was also up there. But then in the second half of the race, Barbora Bukowska came under steam. She started nailing the technical sections. She's a very powerful rider, and she steamed to second place with Desprez taking third. Carrier now leads this World Cup. Definitely different riders, right? Carrier is a rider that came into the season as probably the top favorite from the first years, like tipped for the world title, also by us. And so far, it didn't really look that great this season. In the US scene, she was not as dominant as she was last year. At the Pan American Championships, she lost to Alyssa Sarkisov. In Dublin, she finished third on a course that really played to her strength. But today, on a course that arguably didn't play to her strengths as much, she's not technically that great, she did deliver. She took the win, and this is the first time this season that we have seen that. And it's also encouraging for her because this is the time to be in form. And, well, of course, tomorrow will be showing, is it one-off, is it the course, whatever. We'll see again later what happens, but definitely different riders in this top 10 than in Dublin.
Yeah, and you know we are getting closer and closer to the World Championships in a way. Yeah, so I think for that is where most people want to have their peak and want to be at their best. So I think for someone like Carrier was definitely someone that you can expect to be at her best, or at least try to be at her best at the Worlds, and is going to be a favorite going into that race. For me at least, it's going to be interesting to see, as you say, as I say in Dutch, zijn we vertrokken. Is this going to be now the moment in which she is going to, not look back, win the rest of the races that we have on the calendar for the World Cup, and then just launch herself as the main favorite for the Worlds? I think that is going to be interesting to see. She got a course that suits her well. Now it's just a question on the different part of course that we are going to have with tomorrow as well. How that will play out. I think that will be interesting. And yeah, as you say, it's a bit different, the top 10, how it's shaping up compared to Dublin. But I think also we just got it. You know, it's a different moment of the year for sure, and it's also, the course of Dublin is quite different if you compare it to Hulst. It's almost no similarities in a way. So yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the race, but from what I saw, it was definitely interesting on the live timing how the race play out. But it was Carrier all the way.
Yeah, it was Carrier all the way, and I think what you tried to point out is like, is this the first of many, or is it a wide open field? Because it did look wide open today. Ultimately, it was a commanding win, a not necessarily statement win, but it was good by Carrier. I believe she's been in Spain with her road team, Arkea. I think it's a very clever signing by Arkea. I've said it before. I think Carrier will be a good road rider, although she lacks the experience there. A few things to note. I think Bukowska, very, very strong season. She's a first year. Don't forget that. You could see today that Duterne was quite good. She's technically quite gifted. It looked quite solid what I saw from her. The junior woman raced in drier conditions. Pelizzotti, she's the daughter of Franco Pelizzotti. Very good fighting spirit. I liked what I saw there. Kabaka, a bit disappointing today. She could have done better on this technical course, but it looks like she just doesn't have the fitness at this point in the season. Last year, she also came out of nowhere at the World Championships. Solid outing by Sarkisov in 9th. Bit disappointing, of course. It's always going to be disappointing when you're the World Cup leader to finish 14th by Cusack. She said she had some heavy legs, didn't quite feel it, and hopes that tomorrow will be better. She had a bit of a shorter turnaround after nationals. She needed to go home and do some exams, then came here and immediately into things, whereas the others had a bit more time to prepare. So we'll see tomorrow. Gotwaldova also in the category of disappointing. I thought these were the courses and conditions we would see more from her, but so far it's not really shaping up to be her season. And then the European champion Anja Grossman, that could be from the result sheet be classified as disappointing in 13th, but she had a very bad first lap. She had a bad call-up despite being European champion and really needed to move through the field and did that quite well. Then finally, the men junior Issam. This was also not that exciting. Well, exciting, yes, but not that tense. Gilles Lejeune, first year. He's on the Deschart Hens FSP team. Attacked in the first lap, technically by far the best rider. Every lap he was able to ride that climb again, like the one under the bridge with the stairs, like at the top before you head to the windmill section. He needed to unclip, but he gained so much time there every lap, and technically it was so good. He took the win. Second place went to Agostinaccio. I think Agostinaccio, the European champion, could have challenged for the win, but he crashed in the first lap on the barriers because the rider in front of him, Ben Braafman, ate it. He hit the second barrier, went down, and therefore he took down Agostinaccio, needed to chase. Strong second half of the race. Third place went to Arthur van der Boer. And Van der Boer's race was kind of like his season. At moments it looked very good, and then at other moments it looked horrible. In the final lap he was fighting with Agostinaccio, then he looked to decide that battle, but then he messed up a couple of times again and needed to settle for third. And again, also here, different riders in the top 10 than in Dublin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for Lejeune, it's interesting to see that he was able to capitalize, on the course. You commented on him that he technically is definitely someone that holds his own and is able to use that on the course. So I think that is a development which is interesting to see. Also, Agostinaccio being able to get himself in the top 3 on the podium after. Also, I think in Namur he did. That was not the official World Cup race, but I think he won that as well. So. He's definitely in good form, but just not able to beat Lejeune. But yeah, it's some new names in the top 10. I think one of the names that I can't really look over is the guy in 4th, Michal Schichta, if I say it correctly, is a Slovakian rider. What did you think of him? Because that's a name for me at least, a new name.
No man, that was crazy performance by him. Like, I just saw him move through the field, and the first time I saw him, like, is that Hofer? Nah, he can't be Hofer, because Hofer is in front. What's going on? I was genuinely confused. This guy then opened his Cyclocross 24 page during the race to see, like, who is he? And his results didn't stand out. He was 21st in Dublin. Okay, he won a couple of the Slovakian races, but also not all of them. He was beaten by a couple of Czechs a number of times this season, but what I saw today, I like it. He's a first year. His ability to get off the bike and run with the bike looked fantastic. He kept moving through the field. He had a bad call up. He moved through, overtakes here, smart racing, and he never lost positions. He just kept going, consistent pacing. I was really impressed. It looked really good. He looks really talented. And other riders up there also look talented. Cas Timmermans, the Dutch rider in 5th, is a first year. He was in 2nd for a while, but he couldn't keep up the pace. Hofer, he's more of a road rider, but also not like a full roadie. He has some technical ability. He did decent, but you could definitely see that some of the more technical riders, like for instance Oscar M.A. from the UK, they came into their element here, and Sista, he was one of those. He was in the zone. He was hammering it, and that was super surprising and also quite fun to see. And then if you look at the other hand, you see always a couple of disappointments, like Vassal again. I don't really know what happened, but his first and second lap were not great, but he also never managed to get those lap times down again. So he finished eventually outside of the top 20. The World Cup leader, Bruyère-Joumard, didn't have the technical abilities to survive on this course. But then on the other hand, you see like some smaller riders like Milo Wills, he was managing to get around the course quite well. I spoke with Aiden Volmuth, who had some issues. He was missing his toe spikes and he was also struggling with his chain at some point in the race. He finished 17th, but he shared just a little bit about his race. Aiden Volmuth, today top 20 result. What did you think of the course here in Hulst?
I thought it was sick. It was nothing like we have at home, and it's quite scary at points. Going in like full force with a lot of these other juniors. We were going really fast, especially the first lap. Pretty scary, but had to take lines you didn't want to take sometimes, but it was good. In pre-ride, we got to pick a couple because we knew something like that would happen, and it was just a great race overall.
What tires did you run? It was a bit wet today. How did it compare to your pre-ride yesterday?
I went with the full Limas. Probably would have gone a little less, but considering the course and how dangerous it can be, wanted the safer option, so I would make it to future races.
And final question, how did your race go? You had a good start, then you fell back a bit. What did you think overall? Are you satisfied?
I think I could have gotten a better result, but I'm happy where I ended up because I'm safe and I am able to race again, and just got to make a couple better decisions on different equipment for the first lap, as toe spikes might have been a little more necessary on today's course.
Okay, good luck in Zonhoven tomorrow, Aiden.
Thank you.
Good, Issam. I don't know if you have anything else you would like to know from these results, else we can wrap it up.
I think we have made it long enough, so we could better just round it up and already focus on tomorrow because we are racing again.
Yes, the World Cup heads to Zonhoven, as will I. So yeah, it should be good. Issam, thank you for being here.
A pleasure. Good luck tomorrow, and we speak again.
Yeah, it will be fun, I think. Zonhoven is my favorite race, so hopefully the rain stays away. Thanks everyone for listening, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.